for the first time, feels weird starting a new thing. For the first time, welcome to Brizinger and Eragon podcast. This is a podcast by the Zebo Effect Network. I'm your host, Spencer. I'm joined by my co-host, Abby. This is our first episode of the podcast, so we're going to be revealing kind of what the podcast is going to be about, what we're talking about this season. Clarification, this is not Brizinger der Eragon podcast, which is a German podcast, I believe. I'm sure they do great things. And we're not trying to steal their thunder, but in German. So, so I'm Spencer, joined by Abby. We've been friends for a really long time, fans of a lot of different books and mediums. We've actually podcasted before on other podcasts as well. And so this is kind of our chance to step into a project for us that we're doing, that we're producing. And also just out of a desire to see more fandoms represented, specifically the Eragon fandom, because it's like a pretty large group of people, pretty devout as well. We really love it. And there's not a lot of podcasts that represent the large fan base. And so part of it is a desire to do that. And then part of it is the new Eragon series is hopefully coming quickly upon us. And so this is a fun time to be getting into it. There's new books coming out. There's just a lot to talk about. And so we hope to do that. Our third co-host, our guest is going to be David, who has a very interesting role to play in our podcast. He also doubles as our producer. So hi, David.
Happy birthday, David.
Happy birthday, David. Yeah, absolutely. Merry Christmas, David.
Yep.
So the very first thing I wanted to do before we kind of set the stage in terms of the podcast is talk a little bit, it's kind of a palate cleanser of getting talked about Eragon and the series, is talking about our favorite books. I put our favorite books and movies, which was kind of a joke because there's only one movie, but it's our favorite and least favorite.
Okay. I enjoy watching the movie. Everybody hates on it, but I don't mind it.
It's been a hot minute. I'm excited to watch it for this.
Yeah.
So Eragon is my favorite movie, and it's my least favorite movie as well. It's very esteemed company.
Yeah.
Abby, would you like to say what your favorite movies and books are?
Well, Eragon is the best of the movies that they've made so far.
Yeah, that's your opinion. But I would agree with you,
So I saw that you put this in the outline when you asked to rank favorite books. I would like to just let everyone know I like the Eragon series. I have read it once, and that was like in high school. It has been a little bit since I've read them. I did go back and revisit the first book maybe a couple more times, but haven't committed to the full series in a long time. So while I remember some of the things throughout the series, there are a lot of things I don't remember. And so right now, I don't know that I could give a really good book ranking. Right now, I would say that the first one is my favorite, just because that's the one that I'm most familiar with and have read the most and have the most experience with. But as for the rest of them, I couldn't tell you what happened in which book. I just remember the storyline kind of as a whole.
I kind of think that happens a lot for a lot of people. And part of it is just, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But Christopher meant to write 3 books, and then he ended up writing 3 and 4 as separate books. And then, but the story bleeds pretty much straight through. I think it's just enough that Brizinger, the book, is a self-contained story, and it's really good. But I can see why people get confused.
Well, and David and Spencer know that I also just really love the firsts of things. I love the first Harry Potter book. Now, my favorite is the third book. But I really like the first one just because I like beginnings. I love the world building. I like being introduced to all the characters. I like just getting thrown into this new thing. So I feel like I can confidently say right now that Eragon's at the top of my ranking. But as we go through this podcast, I'm excited to see how that changes. But,
yeah, and these books are much longer too. And so this podcast is going to take a much longer form, I think, in that way too. This is probably my fourth reading of the Eragon book, which we're going to be reading for this season on the podcast. I tried reading the series when I was younger and got bored and put it away. And then when I came back to it again was probably 2 years ago. So I was a full-blown adult at that point. And so now I've read through the whole series twice. I've read Eragon 3 times, the book. And so I feel like I have enough expertise that I can actually answer questions and stuff for you, Abby, and David. But also, yeah.
Because we're in a unique spot where you have read the full series through multiple times.
Yep.
I've only read it through once, and David's not read it through at all.
And David's not read it at all. So that's part of why David's not here, is because he's our newbie. And so it's gonna be really interesting hearing. He just doesn't know any of the spoilers. And so I'm really excited to have that balance. My favorite book is Brazinger, hands down. And I think a lot of the Eragon fans would generally agree. I have the outline, but then I also have my notes. I think that Brazinger is my favorite. This might come as a surprise. I've come around a lot to Eldest. When I first read the series, I thought, man, Eldest is a drag. And then when I came back this last time I read through them, I said, wow, Eldest gives us a really comprehensive deep dive into the world. Eragon is very surface level, and Eldest provides a lot of lore and an important backdrop. And I realized that Brazinger and Inheritance don't work at all without Eldest.
Yeah. setting
it all up, building that foundation. And so for me, it's Brazinger, Eldest, Inheritance. But Inheritance is not, I don't know. I have opinions about Inheritance. I think it's the end. So it has to be like, it's a big ending and it's sufficient for the series, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
And I think I usually am the opposite. I usually like the endings, but Inheritance is very long. It suffers from Return of the King Isis a little bit, where where it like drags on like an incredibly long time after the good guys win and stuff. Oh, sorry, spoiler. So yeah, so it's Brazinger, Eldest, Inheritance, Murtagh, then Eragon. But like the last 3 are all pretty close to each other. And that might be heresy to put Murtagh over Eragon. But I just think that his writing style, and the only reason I really stuck through the series was Eldest was like a big change in the game. And kept me intrigued.
Yeah.
Coming into it as an adult, I think if I was reading it as the right age group, it would be a different story. Favorite character? I imagine this one would be a little harder as well, Abby.
Yeah.
And you can cop out and say Eragon too.
See, my cop out was going to be Saphira.
Okay.
But I also, with most books with dragons, I find that I really like the dragon characters. Just because it's interesting to see how authors write, like,
well, you're gonna love Murtagh
from a creature's perspective, but like a magical creature's perspective. And I also just really like the bonds that Saphira and Eragon have, and just like the way that she speaks and her wit too. And so, I don't know. That could change after I read the series again, but who knows?
Well, Abby, you might not know this, but Christopher Paolini's favorite character is also Saphira. So
That's nice.
you kind of hit the nail on the
I
head.
mean,
Um, I don't think you're gonna remember who this character is. It's my favorite character.
I may not.
I seriously doubt it. Like
That's okay.
100%.
That's okay.
It is not a character that I think people would name very often. It's Nargarshfog.
It's a mouthful. And
Well,
you're right, I don't remember, but I will look forward to reading about them here
yeah,
later.
Nargarshfog is not in the first book. He appears in Eldest towards the end. He is
Mm-hmm.
the captain leader of the Urgle group,
Mm-hmm.
and he does some stuff with Eragon. Um, he's freaking awesome, and every time he shows up on the scene, I just get giddy. He's
Mm-hmm.
just because he's a Cole also, so he's just a super unique character in a lot of different ways, both in form and what he does and how he acts and stuff like that.
Nice.
And he really has a really big impact on the series, even though he's not in it very much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, would love to see him ride a dragon someday. He probably won't because he doesn't really need to, but he's the best.
I don't know. Petition hard enough. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I think he technically was in Eragon, but he doesn't.
Not
He
much
doesn't.
there.
No, he's not. Yeah, he's not like a. You don't hear from him verbally or anything. He was just. He
Right.
was. Let me rephrase that. He was present at some of the events in Eragon,
Mm-hmm.
but he was not obviously on the same side.
Right.
But so he's like the joke favorite character. But if I'm being more serious, it's Murtagh.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
And yeah, that's part of why Murtagh sneaks its way in my ranking above Eragon because it's not a perfect book. It's not a perfect book, and Abby, we'll talk about that when you finish reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Abby's doing double duty.
Yeah. Trying to hit two at once.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm really interested. We'll have to keep it careful with David, but I'm really interested for you because you're reading Christopher Paolini's writing now with like both of his space books behind him and all of the inheritance cycle and literally 25 years of an author career.
Yeah.
20 years plus versus like the very beginning. And so I think you're going to be doing a fair bit of the writing is definitely different in that far. I think you'll also enjoy the dragon relationship in that one. Like that was what I liked most about it was because we hear from the dragon once.
Yeah.
In the inheritance cycle. And so we don't know anything about him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now we're going to set the stage for the podcast a little bit. Talk about our hopes for the podcast. This will be that part where David tunes in. I'm sorry for how spoiler free it's going to be, but I'll explain why we're doing this way. That's why when I talked about Murtagh, I said the dragon. We all know who he is, who they are.
Uh-huh.
So in this podcast, we are dedicated to doing a full deep dive to Allegasia, Inheritance Cycle, and beyond. Even the pronunciations, we'll do our best. But for newbies, that universe is Eragon, Eldest, Brisingar, Inheritance, The Fork, The Witch, and the Worm, Tales of Allegasia. Great read, by the way, Abby. You should read it someday. Yeah. You can read Murtagh without it. Murtagh, the beginning of Murtagh is actually the fork in a different character's perspective.
Oh.
And then Murtagh. Okay, so there's 6-ish books. But yeah, there are a lot of different fantasy world podcasts that do one of three things. They either read the books, watch the movies, or just chat about lore related to the universe as a whole. And so we're going to go for doing all three in a very balancing act. But using the books as a vehicle to talk about those things. And so this season 1 of the show, we're going to be reading the book Eragon together in 10 chapters per episode sections. We're going to put the chapter titles down as well in the episode descriptions to keep them, because he doesn't do chapter titles.
Yeah.
He doesn't do chapter numbers, which is really helpful for making a podcast. Just messing. Okay. And then every couple episodes of though, we're going to do an episode like this one, kind of like this one, where Abby and I will talk about lore, completely spoiler full. We'll also do some news, speculating on new books coming out and stuff like that. I got some hot scoops I'm excited to share. And it's usually coinciding where we're at in the series. And so, for example, we're about to record in a couple of days the Eragon chapters 1 through 10. Then we're going to do another episode on 11 through 20. And then we're going to pause. And then we're going to, right when Eragon and Brom get their horses, their trademark horses, we're going to talk about horse characters, all steed related characters that aren't dragons in Allegasia and some other topics. But that'll be like our fun topic. And we can talk about I'll just say his name, about Snowfire and like what people own Snowfire throughout his experience and his like part in the story. And then later, like we'll do a character study on Brom at a specific point. That's another episode coming this season, but I'm really excited for that episode. So the crazy side of the book reviews is, as Abby talked about, this is my third read through, maybe fourth read through of Eragon. It's Abs' second. And David will be reading the book for the first time. So we're strongly advising David to avoid the internet at all costs. Partly because Christopher Paolini directly responds to fans a lot. He actually reads the Eragon subreddit and will respond to people. And he also talks to fans on YouTube channel, TikTok, and more. With honestly, and fair play to him, the Inheritance came out 14 years ago. So he doesn't have much regard for spoilers for the Inheritance cycle. That all being said, I think I completely didn't know any of the spoilers or plot twists, and I read it 2 years ago. And so I'm hoping David can avoid a lot of these. And his speculation is going to be very interesting, because we're going to make him go, what do you think you're doing next? And Abby and I are going to put on our best poker faces. But I already am fighting that if you're wanting full spoiler talk, just tune into the next lore episode. I think we're going to have a segment that I'm going to call Notes Without David. Because I already have some that we can't talk about with David. There's too many spoilers from later in the series that Abby knows about. Maybe she doesn't know when the spoiler was revealed. But she knows who's who in the zoo. Okay. But yeah, we're definitely gonna do full spoilers talk. We're gonna attempt to speculate about Paolini's next book, which is book 6, but it's not book 5, but it's technically book 6. Because he also has planned a book 5, which is like the direct sequel to Inheritance. But he keeps saying that this next book he's writing, and the last one, he's like, yeah, I'm writing a new book, but it's not that. I'm doing setup for that. I'm like, Christopher, you're killing us. And that's how the whole, I mean, I think everyone that I've talked to that's fans, they're like, well, what's it going to be? You know? But I'm really excited. Abby, any thoughts going into the podcast?
I'm honestly just excited to dive back into this fandom. Because it's been a while since I obviously have read it, but then at the time that I read it as well, not many of my friends had, so I never really got to talk about it with anyone besides my mom. But for those of you who may have listened to some of our other podcasts, especially our Harry Potter one, I was gonna say my mom.
You're gonna have to have Jen on then.
Loves to read, and it was my biggest person I go to talk to about books, and so it was nice having my mom to talk to. But it's just not something I really got to dive into the lore or do background work trying to figure out characters and other things. So I think it'll just be nice to do a deeper dive into this fandom as a whole, which will be cool.
Yeah. I mean, I found that there's not a lot of people fans that I talk to about this series. Speaking of friends, these lore episodes are not always going to be just Abby and I. We'll probably bring in Jen, have her pick an episode. And then also some other friends of the network that we're in, Cole and Tim probably make appearances. They're very busy right now, so they're like, we're like, we want to help, but like maybe there's the one-off appearance. Tim reread the whole series for Murtag coming out, and I'm like, that's killer for you. But
That
I'm like,
was a
but at the
mountain to
time,
climb.
but at the time, I was like, I just read it for the first time, so I was like, I don't need to read all of it again.
Yep.
But yeah, great stuff. And if David has thoughts, he's gonna put them in right here. Wow, what a great thought, David. That was amazing.
Whoa. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy birthday. Okay, so the topic of today, and don't forget about time. This is not a very lengthy topic, so we're just going to be talking about the backdrop of Eragon and where Christopher started out. Some of this I got from the website paolini.net, which has a lot of great stuff. But part of it, I'm going to be filling in pieces that I read from other places as well. First thing you need to know, I don't know, how much do you know about Christopher's life, Abby?
I don't know a ton. I know that he started writing Eragon when he was a teenager.
Okay, great. So I can fill in. So great. So I can be telling you about this.
Yeah.
So Christopher was homeschooled, which tells you a lot. I feel like about how much time he had on his hands to be able to write a book.
I imagine that he was one of those kids who, well, I guess I could go two ways. I would like to think that he was a student who finished all of his work in like 2 hours and then just spent the rest of the day just writing.
So from what I can read, he graduated high school at 15 via mail because it was 2000. The year 2000. And so he was doing like, they would mail him textbooks and stuff to do, and then you'd mail back. And I remember that still being somewhat of a thing when we were young, but the internet was starting out and stuff like that. So anyway, he graduated high school then. He wrote a lot of stuff. He read a lot of some of his favorite books he references was Jeremy Thatcher, and Dragon Hatcher, which totally rhyme, but you know. Oh, it's Jeremy Thatcher, Dragon Hatcher. I haven't read this book. It's one title. I talked about Frank Herbert's Dune. I find that really interesting. We could probably find some parallels. Raymond E. Feist, The Magician, and then a bunch of other authors. So, like a lot of us as kids, the idea for Eragon became as just like daydreams. And then he finished with high school. So he mostly finished high school, and then he just kind of did this as like a hobby or a personal challenge. And he hand wrote the first 60 pages, as one does. Right. And then he also found that, and this is my favorite parts of this too, and I think that's why I want to do this episode, is because people should know. He found that like doing the same things as his characters gave him a better understanding of their world. And he lived he grew up in Montana, still lives there, right next to the Beartooth Mountains. I'm a hiking nerd in my spare time, so I love this. So he was able to come up with descriptions for his books of other things that maybe other authors would just skip over. And so to this end, he forged his own knives and swords. He made chainmail, camped in the mountains, made his own bow, learned to track game, built survival shelters, cut down trees. And
I mean, people always say, write about what you know, right? And he wanted to know, so he did.
Yeah. Now he's a spaceman, astronaut. That's how he's writing his space series. Right. Just kidding. Yeah, Abby, I'm also double dutying though, because I need to finish To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. So you're not alone. And then I need to read Fractal Noise, so I'm behind.
I did not read that one.
Did you read either of those?
I read, Sea of Stars. But
okay.
But that was also like right when it came out.
It came out a while ago, yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so he brought in he brought some folklore pieces. There's definitely some parallels. I mean, this is also just the hero's journey. I think he definitely built from that basic fundamental thing, which is probably why I'm starting to realize that people make parallels to really popular things. When most of the time it's just like, oh, it's the hero's journey.
Right.
Like, oh, the person's parents are dead and he finds a bigger world and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh, that's just the hero's journey though. It's not it's not
It's
all
true.
Star Wars, it's not all Harry Potter or whatever.
Yeah.
Or Harry Potter's not Star Wars. They're different things. But yeah, it said this thing says he read a bunch of folklore growing up, ranging from the Brothers Grimm to Beowulf, Nordic sagas, and the Aeneid. Gross. Just read the Odyssey. Got him. Along with contemporary fantasies and science fiction, a bunch of Middle Ages stuff that he really enjoyed, daydream scenes. So he was 15 when he wrote the first draft of Eragon. So a lot of people say that he,
which is wild to me still.
So a lot of people say, oh, he wrote the book when he was 15. I think this is a good time to get some clarification on that fact. So he wrote the first draft of Eragon when he was 15, which was partially on paper. And he, remember, it was just a hobby. Huh. And then this part was not on Paolini.net, but I found it from like an interview at another time or something. He said that he looked back at his first draft and he was like horrified by like just the amount of errors and stuff because he'd never written a book before. Yeah. And so he spent another year revising the book back to Paolini.net. And then he gave it to his parents to read after that second revision. So he's 16. Yeah. Then the family decided, and this is just parents. His parents are big influences on this series. Roran and Katrina are characters based off of his parents. At least I'm frozen. I'll get back. Okay. The family decided to self-publish his book. And they spent another year preparing the manuscript for publication, copy editing, proofreading, designing a cover. The original cover is that one that I sent earlier today where it has the eye of the dragon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's the original. He drew that himself.
Nice.
As one does. He also drew this map of Allegatia. That's the background of this, if you're watching on YouTube. Yep. And then creating marketing materials. So it's been revised twice. And so he's 17 by now. And then they spent another year promoting the book at libraries, schools, and there's a bunch of fun pictures of Christopher in a medieval outfit, like promoting and reading the books and stuff. Really cool stuff. The fun fact, because I watched a video about Christopher talking about it, he has an untarnished original copy of that first edition. And apparently it's like 60 pages longer than the one that we're reading now. Interesting. And he said they go for like $1,000 now. Like if you wanted to buy an original copy.
The author's cut.
Yeah. And then he said he also has another copy that's like from his local library that's like all beat up. And he keeps that one as like a keepsake to let him know that people do read his books. That's like before the internet was a huge thing. Yeah, I thought it was cool too. But yeah, so at one point, so people were reading the book. It wasn't like huge, obviously, because they were paying their own money to promote it and giving them away and stuff like that, just trying to get the book out there. So in summer of 2002, an author had a stepson had a copy of it, and he told his stepdad to read it and look at it. And then the author, Carl Hiason, he brought it to his publisher. And then Michelle Fry, who is the editor for the entire Inheritance cycle and all of the things, she contacted Christopher's family and asked if they might be interested in Random House publishing the book Eragon. Obviously, the answer was yes. Yeah. And then they did another round of editing. They published Eragon in August 2003, and it became immediately a New York Times bestseller. So he became a New York Times bestseller at like 18. is what I can
Do you ever
best
get teary
guesstimate.
about success stories? Because I do.
I really don't, but Abby is. Yeah.
It's fine.
No, it's fine. For me, it's like my daughter and Toy Story 3 and animated
Yeah. I
that
was
kind of
going to
thing.
say it might just be the fact that I'm still learning how to function off of my Lexa Pro, but
Oh, no, there you go.
it's fine.
Just putting it out there, Abby. Nice.
Hey, mental health. I'm a therapist. Mental health is important.
That's
Destigmatize.
fair. That's fair. So yeah, and then after that, he just moved forward. We can talk more about how he got into Eldest and stuff later.
Yeah.
But yeah, he basically um, had to do he did an extensive tour, and he began writing Eldest a year later. And then like right as he's writing Eldest, he also the Eragon movie got released because Eldest got published in 2005, which is a crazy turnaround for a huge book.
Oh, yeah.
Like he started writing it in 2004, and then he published in 2005, and then Eragon the movie got released in 2006.
Wild.
Pretty wild. But yeah, so that's kind of the background for Eragon. I don't know what else actual story background that we would like. Is there anything we feel like we need?
I don't think so. I think I'm just always wondering like what inspired. I mean, you talked a little bit about this, but like what inspired him to create the world that he did. You know.
Yeah, he's inspired by a lot of Nordic stuff. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the stories and the languages, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
languages he creates are based from Nordic or Welsh, as we talked about before we started
Yes,
recording.
we did.
Galbatorix is Welsh for big king. So that was your fun fact of the day. And so just yeah, there's a ton of different influences here.
Yeah.
I think it would be silly to say that Lord of the Rings did not influence him on some level, but he does differ from that a fair bit.
Yeah. Well, and this is not like so similar to anything that we've read before. It's a very unique thing.
Yeah.
If anything, I think he set the stage for series and stuff that are out now.
Yeah, and also like there are a lot of influences, but it's more like one little thing from here and one little thing from here. But then like the Urgles and the Razak are like completely original species.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the world he made is like the map is entirely his. The dwarves and the elves are also distinctively different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I'm the most excited to talk about, I think, is the cultures. And he has like religions in this universe too, and there's a lot. And the magic system is also intriguing too.
Mm-hmm.
Although it does get a little bit where they're only talking about magic for like an entire chapter.
Yeah.
And but I still think it's a really interesting and fundamental bit of the universe, and it's always changing too, as you'll find in Murtagh.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Abby, do you have any other thoughts?
I'm just excited to get rolling. Honestly, when I started reading Eragon again, I read the first 10 chapters and then I was like, I don't want to stop reading. But if I don't stop, I won't remember what happened in the first 10 chapters because I'll have read a lot more than that.
Exactly.
And so I'm practicing some really good self-control, but I really want to keep reading.
I know. Well, I was thinking we might record the book ones faster or something like that too. I don't know. We'll see how that kind of plays out.
I might just end up giving in and read the whole book and then just have to go back and do refreshers of what happened.
That's That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Absolutely fair. Well, we didn't want to really go too long or anything on this episode. We really just wanted to open the door into the universe and step into it. And so we're really excited. I'm really excited to bring David in and start hearing his thoughts and start demanding his newbie thoughts.
Demanding.
Well, the main thing I'm going to tell him next week is just like, hey, just BT dubs. This book was written and then revised at least 4 times.
I mean,
and so it's coffee that's been filtered through 4 times. So it's still coffee, but it's very, And I think that's part of why I love Eldis so much. It's just more, he's so good as a writer. He's come a long way. And he also, I feel like, has more freedom too.
Mm-hmm.
Like they weren't like, make it shorter.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. But that's a wrap on our first episode ever of Brissinger and Eragon podcast. I'm Spencer. I'm joined by Abby. May your swords stay sharp, guys. See you next time.